Truck Talk, brought to you by eTruckBiz.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Truck Talk by eTruckBiz. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about things to contemplate looking ahead to 2021. 2020 has seen a lot of changes in this business, and we know that 2021 is probably going to see a lot of changes as well. Joining me today is a longtime contractor, Tracy Taylor from Kansas, who's been in this business since 2012. He started in Topeka and then expanded into Hays, Kansas, and then Manhattan. In 2017, he got into the line haul business, and he's been an eTruck subscriber for about the past 6 years. Welcome, Tracy.
Thanks, Ben.
Glad to have you on here. Also joining us today is the CEO of eTruckBiz, Jeff Walczak, who is also the founder of eTruckBiz. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello. How you doing?
Thank you, gentlemen, both for being on here with me and taking time out of your busy days. We are in peak, and I know you both have a lot going on, and when people are listening to this, they may be involved in peak as well and have a few minutes on the road. So we'll go on and kick this thing off and get into our topics today about things to look for in 2021. The first thing we're going to talk about is about making better margins. So Tracy, let me start with you, and let's look back at 2020 with all the changes that happened in 2020. I know that margins have been squeezed for a number of reasons, but there's also a lot more business in 2020 for FedEx Ground contractors. So how are your margins in 2020 looking? I know we're not completely at year's end yet, but almost, only less than 2 weeks left. How is 2020 shaping up margin-wise compared to your previous years in this business?
Margin-wise, things are looking better. There's definitely been significant pressure over the last several years on the margins, due to rising costs of labor and all the fun things we're experiencing. But this year in 2020, with the huge spike in volumes, we're definitely seeing a larger increase in our margins. Obviously not quite where we want them to be, just because we're delivering 20% more packages and stops that didn't equate to a 20% cut at the bottom line. They definitely increased, I would say, safely at least 10%.
That's fair, and that's what you're seeing so far. Jeff, you talk to a lot of contractors all across the country. Same question to you. What are some of our customers and the contractors out there across the country looking at margin-wise?
Well, it's interesting. I'm hearing kind of two sides of the story. There's some folks that are telling me that, they're making margins they couldn't believe they ever could. Some folks are making the most money they ever have, which is really good news. That's great news. They attribute it to having some disciplined business practices and that kind of thing. I'm also hearing there are some folks, while their revenues are also at record levels, they're still struggling to margins. So you kind of have both. The surge in volume looks like if you had some good sound systems and processes in place, you were definitely able to take advantage of it. If you didn't, it's going to show in your financial results. Just because you did a whole lot more volume, if you had some questionable practices to begin with, or you weren't really watching what you were doing to begin with, it made it worse, believe it or not. There are some folks that really are struggling right now, even from a margin and money standpoint, believe it or not.
That does make sense. If they don't have the processes in place, when you add more stress to the system, that doesn't mean it's going to get any better. You're probably just going to increase your stress. So, Tracy, knowing that some people are struggling, if they're struggling out there and they don't have the processes in place, what kind of strategies are you implementing now and or improving upon in 2021 going forward? Because we're probably going to see margins continue to be squeezed with all the e-commerce out there.
With the recently announced additional direct payments for people for COVID relief, obviously volume's not going to go away anytime soon. The strategies that we put in place, it's been a long time subscriber to eTruckBiz. We put the power of one in our stops per on-road hour is our number one thing that we try to monitor for our productivity and P&D. And we've been able to increase that by 2.5 stops an hour over last year. So I think as we continue to get denser, we're going to look to continue to try to capitalize on increasing our productivity for all of our people. Having 100% overlap, contiguous work areas, all that has really allowed us to achieve better results. Peak, this has probably been one of the easiest peaks that we've ever been through.
That's good news. And what do you attribute that to?
It just comes back to our base fundamentals of how we operate. We look at how can we make sure that we're utilizing 100% of our revenue-generating assets, which are our trucks and people. We want to make sure that we're not sending guys out there with 4 hours worth of work and paying them for 8. We're trying to get 10 hours worth of work shoved into an 8-hour day for our guys so that they're in the door, out the door, and everything gets delivered in a hurry. By synergizing, as we fill the jar with more sand, the space for air gets tighter, so it's easier to click off, more stops just because, instead of going to a delivery every 1 or 2 blocks, now you've got 3 deliveries per block, and then it just continues to enhance itself as you start going basically door to door.
Productivity is one of the keys. So, Jeff, tossing it back to you, Tracy mentioned productivity. What kind of tools do you recommend that listeners use to help their productivity in 2021?
Well, as far as tools, there's nothing better out there today than the brand new Optics app from eTruck. That is a real game changer when it comes to watching what's going on with the guys, what kind of productivity are you realizing. Got to watch that. If they know you're watching, and if you're watching it, you can actually, you can affect change to those kinds of numbers if you're watching it and holding the folks accountable. I mean, I don't know how you can run a bit, especially anymore with the increase in stops per driver, increase per stops per hour that have to be achieved. I don't know how you can do that without monitoring it as the day goes on.
So you mentioned the Optics app. I've seen it a little bit. Tell the listeners, if they aren't familiar with it, what kind of information is included with the Optics app and how do you use it? Just a brief overview.
Well, there's all kinds of things there, but the point of the Optics app is to give you a place where you can see all of the different things that you need to try to keep track of in one place. For instance, are the guys punching in? Are they punching in, punching out? How many stops do they have? What kind of plan do you have for each particular route? How well they're doing on a per hour basis? How far they're, or how much they've achieved, or how much they've actually gotten done in the particular day? How much further do they have to go? When will they be done? When would you anticipate them maybe coming back to the terminal? There's just a whole bunch of different things packed into that app, and there's a whole bunch more things that are going to go in there.
My understanding is it's made to make a BC's day easier. Is that right? And so that it helps them kind of plan out their day, as you talked about them coming back, knowing how the trucks are loaded, and being able to monitor it early enough so that they can plan for any exceptions or anything that they see pop up throughout the day and not have to wait till the end. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah. Yes. You have to. That's the hard part of this business. Is it's one thing when everybody's there and they're loading their trucks or they're coming back, whatever, and everybody's there and you can watch them, you can talk to them. That's great. But guess what? They get in their trucks and they go out there and then they're on their own. It's a challenge to watch what's going on when they're out there on their own. They have to know that you're watching them when they are out there on their own.
Tracy, I understand, even though you're not a BC, you've looked at the Optics app and maybe 1 or 2 of your BCs are using it. Is that right? What kind of things are they? Do you think they find most helpful in that they're using, that they'll be using in 2021?
We all use the Optics app. I have myself and 4 BCs over both of our P&D operations. It's pretty exciting. I talk with my guys probably 2 or 3 times throughout the day, just get a ground level update on what's kind of going on. I'm watching some things that maybe, they're up and coming in management, so they don't have a ton of experience. So we talk about, I notice a particular driver, somebody isn't being as productive by, let's say, 10 o'clock than he normally is. I usually call and say, hey, what's going on with this guy today? And usually the manager, he's on it. He'll tell me, not feeling good today, or, I had to take care of something or whatever. And then he'll give me his plan on what's going on. I like to watch the clocking in, clocking out, the fuel expenses, because it gives you some real-time data to see what's actually going on out there in the fleet. Being able to see it and be proactive is so much easier to manage than trying to react, from the back foot.
We have a lot to cover today, so this was just the first topic, but just to kind of wrap up the part about the margins before we move on to our next topic, Tracy, to sum it up, you mentioned that productivity is going to be the key to improving results in 2021 if you weren't particularly satisfied with 2020 or the previous years. And one of the ways to do that is by knowing what's happening real time and being able to give your BCs the tools to be productive throughout the day to make their days easier so that they can focus on productivity. Well, let's move on to our next topic for 2021. A lot that has happened in 2020. We've seen a lot more spinoffs this year. We're calling them spinoffs than in the past. Business owners are not selling their whole business, but part of their business. So we're calling them spinoffs. And we're seeing literally millions of dollars of equity being taken out or removed or whatever from a lot of long-time operators. Either some are choosing to spin off some parts of their business or some are being forced to. So let's start, Tracy, with you, and then we'll go to Jeff again. So Tracy, have you seen folks in your terminal and guys you talk to being active in the spinoff, either purchasing other people's or spinning off part of their own operations?
That's the new flavor saver, is what I call it. Quote from FedEx right now is, you got to get your business right size. What are they mean by right size? I mean, with the tremendous growth that we're seeing, it's difficult to manage, right? We're seeing guys jump 20, 30% in volume week after week, and that can be really difficult to sustain. It's hard on your people. It's hard on, the owner, hard on your wallet. But the nice part is with all this rapid growth, there's opportunity. We're actually going through and spinning down some of our operations in both locations. And it's not for, a negative reason. It's just because now is a good time in the business to take that equity that's in the business and turn it into cash. With the volatility and stuff that's out there, dumping off 20, 40% of your business isn't going to completely collapse what you're doing by any means, but it turns you into a much more healthier business. If you can peel off part of the skin, reduce some debt, maybe you can go out, get some newer trucks and capitalize on some efficiencies that way. For us, it's just more mitigating risk, with the new terms and the end of agreement. There's some pretty sharp words in there that, even if you are being studious and a great operator, not going to keep you away from the guillotine. For us, I don't see spinoffs as being bad. We've grown extremely rapidly at Desert Fox in the last 9 years, so it's just a normal way of life for us. But I can definitely see where if you're not prepared and you're not seeing what's coming and you're reacting on that back foot, it's probably pretty tough.
That's good insight for somebody who's been in this business for a while and seen some changes over the years, and especially this past year. So, Jeff, I know you've been involved with a lot of contractors looking to, as Tracy said, maybe use the term right-size their business. If someone's listening to this, can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing for 2021 based on what you've seen in 2020?
Our friends at FedEx are, as Tracy said, wanting folks to right size. So the trend was first to have large operations. Large operations are very difficult to manage and control. So now the thing is, or now the guidance now is to keep operations around 2,500 or fewer stops a day, or even 6-10% of the terminal's service volume. They want to keep an operation in a particular terminal about that size. There are many contractors, CSPs out there that are over 2,500 stops in a particular location. The thing about that is, if you are, you really got to think about that. You really have to. It's nice to have a big operation and hopefully things went well this peak, and if it did, that's great. But if you are, you're going to be asked to get your operation down to 2,500 or fewer stops. There's just no question about it. We've seen that everywhere. And that's going to continue not only 2021, but it's going to continue down the road. So if you're over that amount, or if you're growing close to 2,500 stops, you got to start thinking about what zip codes, and they like zip codes, not necessarily just routes, but what zip codes would make sense to spin off your operation, right? Now, just because you have an idea of what the zip codes that you want to spin off doesn't necessarily mean that the engineering folks are going to agree with you, but you want to have a plan in place and you may want to be proactive and beat our friends at FedEx to the punch. You don't want them coming to you saying, hey man, we need to spin off some stops. We're going to take these stops here. It might not be what you want. You want to have a plan, and you want to go to them and say, well, I know I'm at 3,500 stops or whatever it is. I'd like to take these 1,000, and I'd like to sell them to somebody else. Here they are. What do you think, Mr. FedEx? That's the right way to do this. And you don't want to have to make FedEx come to you to do that. It's not going to. It does. Well, from what we've seen, it doesn't go the way you want it to go if they come to you and ask you to spin anything off. It goes better if you go to them with some sort of plan to get that done.
So you've seen it happen in 2020 where FedEx has gone to a contractor and said, you must spin off, you must right size.
Absolutely. Many times already.
If someone was listening to this and they're taking the advice seriously and it's by zip code, what kind of plans would they need to start making? What would be the first step? What are the first couple of steps that they would need to do if they're thinking about it? How would they start?
Well, everybody knows their work area. There's no real better expert on these work areas than the CSPs themselves. So what zip codes that you might think would, first of all, go together and make up a decent new CSA. The ones that you want to probably keep, the ones that you think are going to grow. Maybe your heavy residential areas, you might want to keep those, or your plan to spin off part of your area may not necessarily be what you think is quote unquote good area. It's also you got to think about it from a cost standpoint. What does it cost you to service the different areas? We actually have a process for analyzing all this for you. So if you come to us and say, hey, I got 10 zip codes, I think these 4 would make a good new 800 stop CSA, something like that, we can actually analyze that and let you know what that looks like, what kind of stops, what kind of packages per stop, miles per stop, all that kind of thing, how long it would take, how many miles the spun off area might be, somebody might be looking at running. And I would take that analysis to the terminal and say, hey, here you go. Here's what I'd like to do. More times than not, if it makes sense, they'll probably agree with you. That's what we've seen in the past. What you don't want to do is have them come to you and then them start taking what they think is a good area, because that might not necessarily, you may end up giving up areas that you don't necessarily want to.
And no one wants that to happen. So you're saying be proactive and start looking at your data in order to know what you would prefer to spin off, so that you can go have a conversation proactively with the terminal rather than them waiting for them to come to you. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, it's all about your data. It's all about, you have the delivery data, or in the eTruck system, we'll have the data, and we can do the analysis for you and let you know, if I took these 4 zip codes, 6 zip codes, whatever, and spun them off, that new area would look like this. It would have this much revenue, and it looks like it would have these kind of expenses and costs. And your remaining area, what's the reduction in your miles? What happens to your density? What happens to all your CSA characteristics? And you really want to look at that first before they come forcing you to do so. It's all about having the data and the ability to do this. I don't know anybody else that can do this right now other than FedEx, and that's not necessarily, I don't think you want to be in that situation. You can ask, there's plenty of folks that are in that situation that would tell you exactly what I'm trying to tell you right now.
Yes, I know, because you've actually talked to them. You know who they are. Won't say their names on the air, but you know that they're out there. Tracy, back to you. I think you mentioned that you're looking at it. What kind of things would you advise, as from the CSP perspective? You're out there in the field. What would you tell someone who was looking to spin off part of their operation? What kind of things come to your mind, number 1 and number 2?
The first thing that I looked at was, how do I get the most density? That's the part that I want to make sure that I'm going to keep. And like Jeff was saying, what does it cost you to service some of this stuff? That's the stuff you want to get rid of. But you also have to keep in mind too that if you're going to get rid of this stuff and you're looking for a monetary return in it, it's got to be viable. You can't just give them all your stops out there in the middle of nowhere. That's extremely expensive to service and, expect that to attract a high value buyer. No one's going to spend a whole bunch of money if you're not, especially if you don't have a very good strategy and good fundamentals on how you're operating your business. If you got guys that are working 4 hours and it takes 3 or 4 trucks to service an area, which really, if you made these guys and held them accountable, you could maybe do it with 1 or 2 trucks. Buyers are going to be interested in, turnkey. The people who are out there buying in this climate, in the market conditions out there, are people with lots of money, and they're going to look for something that is turnkey. And they're willing to realize the value of that turnkey thing. They don't want to hear about how FedEx is mean to you and they just mistreat you. They want to hear about how your business turns a tremendous profit of 20-30% year after year, and on top of that, 20 and 30%, you're growing 10 to 20% every year.
Right, because it's going to be an investment for them, and they're a business person. We could probably spend a lot longer talking about this, and maybe we'll have a future episode about spinoffs. But since we're here to talk about 2021, let's move on to our next topic. And we want to talk about management and management training. We've talked about productivity, talked about margins, talking about the spinoffs. The other big thing that our customers are talking about for 2021 is really upping their training game for their managers and their BCs, because they're entrusting now what have turned into multi-million-dollar investments to folks that are having to run this stuff every day. So, Tracy, what kind of training do you think you and some of the other guys in the terminals where you're operating would be looking to do for their managers, their drivers coming up in 2021?
Management training has probably been one of the things the last couple of years that I've just really, it gets me super excited, because I feel that it's the missing key out there for most FedEx Ground operators. Is how do you manage an entity or a multi-facility operation effectively and in a profitable manner, and that's solely hinges on the ability of the structure of your management team. We've been fortunate enough to utilize the eTruckBiz University and send a lot of our BCs through that. I've been through it a few times, but ultimately, in almost 10 years of being here, management is worth every dollar you put in. If you have people that, we have three facilities that we operate out of right now. I don't have to go into a sort. I don't have to get behind the wheel of a truck. I also don't have to be on the phone 90 minutes a day or, hours upon hours of trying to, talk to this person, or, I got to stop what I'm doing and take care of this. I got managers. Now, I'm involved in a lot of things. I get tons of emails. Ultimately, it rests on these guys that you're paying to run these operations for you. And it's critical that they have the knowledge and the tools to be successful. I mean, without the good, there's some inherent tools that you have to look for when you're out there recruiting these type of people. Just because Jimmy is a tremendous delivery driver and he can do 400 stops a day and he's the greatest delivery driver since they first delivered packages in the 1900s, doesn't make Jimmy a very good manager. I'm not saying that it can't happen, but most of the times, just because you're good at delivering doesn't mean that you're good at putting up with people, managing a relationship with FedEx, or managing multiple people. So those are things that you really have to put a lot of emphasis and focus on, and you have to be willing to trust. That's the other big key.
That's so true. And a lot of times people overlook that aspect that their managers need training, but that's like anything. It'd be like putting a driver out on the road without being trained. And that doesn't go real well either. So it is super important. And one of the reasons why we wanted to bring it up today, Jeff, you were one of the pioneers in training CSP several years ago. Started this off with eTruckBiz training folks. Talk to the listeners a little bit about how it's kind of changed from the past and what you see going forward.
What we offered to begin with was very general, because we didn't necessarily know what folks were going to respond to, and it's evolved into specific training for specific roles now. So for instance, now we have best practices for new contractors. Somebody that's new coming into this business, guess what? FedEx doesn't train you at all. You're assumed to be able to run a transportation company from day one. If you can't, or you don't know what we're talking about, where do you get that kind of training? You're not going to get it from FedEx. And be honest with you, the other CSPs, while some of them might be very helpful and whatnot, they're not there to run your business for you. So where do you go to get any kind of training in this environment? There's different types of training now. There's the new person. There's the person that's been here a long time or a while, but they're just not seeing the results they'd like to get. So how do you get some better, how do I affect what I do to get some better results? There's going to be a brand new BC intensive course that we're going to introduce here in 2021. That's just for BCs, and it's pretty intense, and it's hands-on, and it's workshop style, and we hope that especially new BCs will go through this training, hopefully learn something from it. And exactly as Tracy said, just because somebody knows all the routes and knows where the back door of all the Walmarts are and everything like that doesn't necessarily make them BC material. And it used to be okay when you had 4 or 5 drivers, but if you've got 25, 50 drivers and everybody else that you have to deal with, that is a completely different thing. We see the training courses or the training aspect of what we do, that's going to permeate everything we do going forward here for not just 2021, but for the foreseeable future.
So you mentioned new business owners. I think you mentioned BCs. What about if an AO is listening to this? We still going to have offerings for the AOs going forward?
We do. That's the main thing. Now we have the courses that we have now, almost like everybody comes to those courses, and I think everybody gets something out of them. But I think we have to be mindful of the different audiences have different needs and requirements, and we're going to continue with what we do now for AOs.
Guys, we are running up against our time limit. We try to make the most of everybody's time when we're doing these, and when we have to think about our listeners and how long they travel. So we try to keep this to about 30 minutes. We've covered so much today, with starting off about the margins, which are going to be super critical in 2021, getting squeezed probably even more. Talk about right-sizing their businesses, because that's a new thing. I think, Tracy, you called it flavor saver. And we've talked about management training. We've got a lot more to talk about, but I think those are going to be future episode. So I hope you guys will find some time in the next couple of weeks to join me again to talk about, we've got other things planned, talk about scheduling and making that easier for people, talking about operating budgets, talking about what's going to happen with e-commerce and how people are going to control their cost and opportunities to maybe expand their businesses in 2021. So lots of good stuff that we can still talk about in 2021, but I think we're going to have to wrap it up for today. So thank you both. Thank you, Tracy, for your loyalty to eTruckBiz. We enjoy having you as a client, and you've been a great advocate for us, and we appreciate it. And thank you, Jeff, for your continued leadership in this organization. You really have, when I said pioneering, you really have honestly been doing a lot of groundbreaking in this area. So thank you both. I know it means a lot to both of you. You're very heavily invested in your work. So thank you, and happy holidays to you guys.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks, Ben.